when we're looking at this chart, we're looking at the PRC, that's Public Registry Clearinghouse. That's their website. That's where this information comes from. And what we have is a timeline of the reactions to the data breaches over about a 15-year time horizon. We have three major categories of sentiment captured here: constraining, litigious, and uncertainty. And what we have is a useful chart because it gives us a picture of how the population is actually sizing up at a higher level, what I'd say is a 40,000 foot level. And what we have are the dominating one, that's constraining, and we have litigious and then uncertainty. As we can see over this timeline, it's been a rise and fall. They're about 2015, a little bit of a fall, but back, that's 2016 up to 2017, you see it more of a rise in this information. This is a descriptive piece of information because it gives you insight and it tells you from an exploratory piece or a point of view how this information can let you down the road and give you ammo or ammunition to ask questions about the data to get down to the nitty gritty. All right, so moving on to the next piece,
let's stick with that one real quick. Go back to, we could.
Okay, let's go over that.
Help me understand where this data is coming from again.
It's from a website called the Public Registry Clearinghouse. And what they have is information available about cyber breaches and the history of it. And it's really useful because it gives you insight to what companies were impacted. It has information on files and stuff like that, how that was impacted. And it actually gives you locations, longitude and latitude as well. That information isn't captured here because this is just the text portion of each summary of the data breaches occurring over the time horizon that we're viewing here.
So this so each data point is a word within the summary of a description of a breach?
Okay, so what this is doing is, okay, we're going to get into this a little bit farther when we talk about sentiment analysis, but let's just go over a preview. Okay, so when you do all of the connecting of the words through the inner joins, we'll talk about later, and we're gathering and compiling the information, what you got is you're capturing all these words and it's laying out what the sentiments are based on the matches. Okay, and then it's putting it into these higher level categories: constraining, litigious, and uncertainty. Okay. And then from there, it gives you a high level picture of what's going on in each of these, what I would say, or overall. When you got a collection of news stories or summaries, that's called a corpus. Mm-hmm. And with that, it captures all that information from all of the stories, and however the words are matched and grouped into each of these higher level sentiments, then it gives you the opportunity to present it out either as a bar chart. You could use something like an area chart, just whatever seems to be more appealing or what makes sense to the reader to answer that question. So when you're taking a step back, okay, what questions does this answer? It answers the question of, give me a high-level story of what's going on over this time horizon, and give me the counts as to see what are the dominating categories. This is what I just said: constraining, litigious, or uncertainty.
Gotcha.
So that's what I say. It's more informational and descriptive.
Okay. Can you kind of walk me through what a constraining sentiment versus a litigious sentiment versus a sentiment of uncertainty, what those three kind of mean?
Okay, constraining is like, think in terms of what the word is. This was like what's holding you down, what's considered a challenge in there. Okay, litigious is, okay, what might be a legal issue or legally related. Uncertainty has to do with things that are like unknown or tied to a risk in this mix of words. Like we'll see later on, like may is an example of what's in that bucket of uncertainty, or could, things of that nature.
Gotcha. Okay. So then kind of like continuing to walk through this example, and you might have mentioned what year is is the second from the top, but so not the top bar here, but the second from the top. Could you kind of walk through what that is showing us in a little bit more detail?
Sure thing. How this bar chart is reading is you got the counts coming up, okay? And for the uncertainty category, that really dropped that year. And what you're seeing is all the words that are captured in there is a count of probably well under 500. Well, when you go to the next area where litigious is coming in, you're getting accounts of well over 1,500. All right. Then you go to the next group where it's captured the most words or the most matches is the constraining category.
Gotcha. Okay. And so then what is, based on what we're seeing in the graph, what's the story that it's telling? Or what is maybe what's the story that we're seeing here? What's the data telling you?
The data is telling me, okay, because I'm looking at that high level and it's giving me a picture. It's just like when you just group all the words into these three major categories, it's telling me what are the driving categories. Okay, and it's got it, the ones with the farthest out that we see at the top of the graph there, I should see closer to where the legend is on this chart. You know, that's telling you which ones had the highest counts within that category constraining. Okay, so let's say constraining had the dominating one, then the next level would be litigious, then the next one would be uncertainty. So really what it's trying to do is when you look at how to measure risk with sentiment analysis, what you're looking at is what are your counts looking like in each of these categories. And the higher the count, it's indicating where the drivers are, okay, at this level, these three categories that we have on this graph.
Okay. You want to go to the second one?
Sure thing. Okay, what this is trying to do is give us a picture of how things look in the distribution, and we want to look at the density. And what we're seeing, okay, we're breaking this down. This is a little different for a density chart because it doesn't have the density measure on the y-axis. Instead, it has the three categories of constraining, litigious, and uncertainty. And when you get down to the word level, what it's telling us is the density or the concentration is a count of around one word that's showing up, or in the instances that it showed up when you're trying to match the information. Okay. And as we can see that it's a right skewed distribution. And as we get closer to a count of 5, you know, your density gets less and less. I know there's a little bit of a dip there that you see at a count of 2. And that's kind of interesting to see that. But as I said, you move forward towards the count of 5, it just lessens and lessens. Okay, so this one is capturing everything, all opinions here in this distribution, okay? And it's throwing out a similar pattern that we saw when we look at density by sentiment. And we can see that the concentration, actually the density, is a count of around 1. You can see that it's a rise and fall. We have another dip, or actually a rise, where we're seeing that the information is around 2, just like we saw in the previous chart. And we're seeing that this information is right skewed as you move farther along as the counts increase out to 10, your density gets less and less. So like all three of these charts that we've seen so far are to give us, from an exploratory standpoint, to describe what's happening in the population, to give us that understanding of where your concentrations are, what are your drivers that we saw on the first chart, and just to describe the population of words that you're reviewing.
Okay. So we've got to get into some more of the details then?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
This one is a parallelogram, okay? This still at a higher level, but what we're trying to do here is we're setting this up for a regression model coming up. All right, but what we're doing is we're doing a diagnostic approach here, as opposed to the first 3 charts were descriptive. Okay, what a diagnostic approach does is it tells us the why or the causes of stuff, or it gives us the relationships of things. It tells us, it gives us that inner workings of how things are working, especially when you're looking at multiple columns in a data set and you're saying, well, how do they relate? That's this thing here is telling us, well, how does it relate? What we're looking at here is we're looking at this type of correlation is looking at the word counts, and we're looking at the relationships of these various word counts. And again, we're looking at more of the categories here. It's like now we're capturing in negative versus litigious. You see, it had an 80% correlation so of all these, it had the highest correlation. Like if you go to the uncertainty versus negative, that's a 50% correlation. And then finally, it's that positive versus negative. That's a 40% correlation. So this is really good in giving you information, or because it's telling you how the data relates. And this, from that standpoint, can tell you, or actually tell you how to increase your risk awareness, because you're gaining a familiarity of the inner workings or how things are related and how well they're related, especially if you're trying to do any predictive work. If you know your correlations, you know right off without doing any extra work of adding data columns or data sets or extra variables like in that regression model. This gives you a picture of the best relating data.
Okay. So what we're saying here is that uncertainty has a correlation to being negative, and litigious also has a stronger correlation of being negative. Is that one way to read this?
Well, actually, if you go, the positive correlations are in green. Mm-hmm. And there's no negative correlations here. There's either zero or lower correlations going down, like the worst is like 10%, but everything's basically neutral, a zero, or positive. It's going from slightly positive to very positive. Now we're moving to the regression model, okay? Okay, and what this regression model is trying to do is it's predicting the litigious sentiment. Interesting thing here we see with this is all the data points, you're basically, most all your data points are 25 or less. And the other thing that's pointing to why it's a good fit is you see all the data points, they're residing close to the trend line. Mm-hmm. That's another way of confirming. I'll say that's why that 80% correlation we saw in the parallelogram. Now we can see it on a scatter plot chart where this other thing. The other thing we've added to this chart, just to the histograms, are both the X and the Y axis, and that's showing, okay, like we saw in the previous charts on the descriptive side, that the data is skewed. You know, as you go out higher in the counts, it gets more and more skewed, right skewed. Now we're getting into the nitty gritty. What we're describing of more of the details. Okay, so you're asking, well, what are the causes of these sentiments or these categories? Okay, so we're seeing here, again, we're using the counts as the driver, all right? So we can see something similar with negative and litigious, with breach and breached, whereas we see uncertainty, may, could. There's some other words like exposure to, or appears. Mm-hmm. And those are all the high level numbers of giving me, you know, everything that is the highest counts,
right,
with these categories. And that, so basically what it's giving you a cause and effect kind of scenario here. That's why it's diagnostic. It's telling you what is driving this at the word level.
Okay.
Give you specifics.
Yeah, this is interesting. And this helps for me kind of tie a lot of what we've been looking at so far, kind of tying it back and seeing at a little more detailed level why uncertainty is where it's at, or litigious is where it's at. And it's because of these specific words, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So these are the specific words within that. What was the website? PRC, Public Registry Clearinghouse. Okay. So these are those specific words within there relative to the breaches that are discussed that show the sentiment, right?
Yes,
Okay,
that's right.
perfect. Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to chart 7. And what this is key biograms. Okay, what a biogram again is just a sequence of 2 words. And just in R, you have the ability to create these biograms where you have the ability to say, okay, I have, give me data on this side of the fence, but give me everything that's following it,
Mm-hmm.
through all of these summaries about the breaches, and tell me what's following it. Okay, so I says, okay, just out of curiosity, let's see what's matching up with data and what's matching up with malware. Because here we're trying to discover what it is that's driving this, or seeing more from a different angle, what potential risks are from these. Okay, so what we're saying on data, well, breach is the big one, because you can see that's a count well over 600.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple others. Your data included in data security are the next highest ones. So I was kind of surprised when I looked this initially to say, well, malware, there's not much traffic here with the word counts. But again, this is a discovery process, and you're doing these searches just to see what shakes out, what you can identify.
So that you know where to go deeper, right?
Yes. And you can either, you can dig as much as you want and put the combination of words as to what it is, especially if you're well grounded in cybersecurity type terminology and stuff, where to get more information that might be useful to a potential client or a client, just having conversations with them.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so the last thing I want to say is this is more quantitative because it's got the occurrence stuff. Now we're going to take a look at another tool here, and it's a negation biogram network. Okay, this is a qualitative approach to looking at associations. We're trying to identify risks among the word associations. Okay, so if we take like that upper left piece there without, we see 3 right off the bat. That's without permission, without proper, without authorization. You go to the next cluster, things like not disclosed, not discovered, not authorized, not recovered. Those are ones that have a hint or suggesting risk. If you go to the no cluster, that has like no evidence, no reason, no specific, or even no password, those are shaking out a risk type sentiment in this mix. And again, this is a qualitative piece. It's a good add-on to the other pieces because you're getting an understanding of not just the words that are driving the sentiments that we saw early on, from the higher level to the more detailed level, or even a predictive level. It's just giving us a good feel of what's out there, what are the associations.
Before we go to that last one, so I know you've mentioned the word qualitative and quantitative
Right.
analysis a couple different times. Could you kind of explain to the folks what those are and what the differences are between the two?
Sure thing. Okay, when you're thinking a quantitative thing, you're thinking in terms of math involved in the picture here. Okay, so you're saying, okay, well, how much of something, or what is the tally of it? Or like I said, when we look at the key biograms, that chart that gives you all the tallies of those counts here. Whereas when you come to this network, you're seeing the word relations, and you're just seeing a different picture of how it's related, and you have this cluster that's branching out and showing all the words that are associated with each of these negation words.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, so now when looking at the breach biogram network, what we have here is 2 words. Okay, and it's just like, this is a different point of view like we saw with the key biograms. Now we're looking at this from the qualitative piece, where we can see all the relations in what's tied into data. We can see key ones like data theft, data exposed, and data loss. When we look at the malware side, we see malware attack and malware installed. And this is asking us, okay, of the breaches, what happened, why did it happen? And these are answering, or can be used to answer those types of questions.
All right. So if we're going to tie this back to audit, I know we've been talking about risks and the risks that it show and how we can use it to make conversations. How would an individual auditor use this on an audit or to develop an audit?
Okay, so the real use in this, you can use this on the front end to develop an overall audit plan, like an audit plan for the year. You can use this information to adjust an audit plan for the year. And how you can use this is you have a feed of information that is coming in, and it's giving you fresh information to look at things from a different angle, what you might not have thought of before. And if you have these pieces and you look at your audit plan and you look at proposed procedures for conducting the risk assessment for the specific audit, it can help you fine tune this information and keep ahead of what's emerging. And that said, it's more of an informational tool to help you make adjustments, as to how you're going to go about your audit. If you're seeing out there in industry or just broadly speaking, if such events are like you're seeing a lot of data theft occurring, okay, you're starting to think, okay, what kind of procedures am I going to have in place to see that we have working controls in there to mitigate that risk, for example. And so it's just, I want to say, you think of this as more information to give you tools to have a better brainstorming exercise with your peers within your unit. That's what I want to say.
Okay. And what would be your biggest takeaway from this? So there's 9 different graphs that we've looked at. What would you say would be the specific point maybe within one that sticks out to you that would make you as like an auditor ask more questions?
I'd be curious about, if you're starting from the descriptive side and the litigious side, okay, what words are driving this litigious sentiment? Because what I'm curious to start digging in is, okay, these various companies or entities, how were they affected from a legal aspect, from the fines? And that gives you, at least it gives you a starting point there to look at where to go get other information to see how fines are impacting companies and why those fines are coming about. Another piece would be looking at, well, a lot of value in predictive analytics, because there seems to be a big demand for that, even more so than the descriptive or diagnostic, from my understanding or my reads about data analytics. But that seeing that relationship over time and seeing how it's behaving over time is a critical piece, because it may lessen off, it may change, your correlations may change, and having that knowledge of how the information is flowing and how the correlations are changing and how that trend is changing is key to either you keep on that path exploring that information and getting that to make sure that you're capturing all the details of the words that are driving these sentiments, or it may cause you to go to a different direction and look at things a little differently because things are popping up. Okay. The other piece that I think is pretty useful is having something like this with a series of charts. Gives you the opportunity to look at things from a holistic approach rather than just trying to focus in on one. And the design of this approach was to start at a high level and be able to answer questions and think like an auditor and give the details as to what is going on under the hood, so to speak. In that way, you have both working together. It gives you the chance to look at your audit plan and say, well, how am I going to allocate my resources to look at these kinds of things, and set that pecking order, the priority of how you do your audits during the year.
Okay. And then what's the tool, if somebody wanted to do this type of analysis, what tool is this in that they would be able to do it in?
This tool, our programming language is the nuts and bolts of this, is what created this dashboard, these charts. It's pretty useful because it has so many tools in there. These tools, what I say, are packages equipped with functions, just like you see in Excel.
Mhm.
And you have all these various functions. You're putting this information together to go search for information, predict information, and get these answers as to the whys or the whats.